Hello and welcome to Paratalk. On this episode, I'm joined by Nigel and Juliette of Out-there Paranormal.
Hi, thank you for having us on.
Yeah, it's great.
It's an interesting show this week because you're kind of a duo, so you kind of do a little bit of both things. My first question, jumping straight in, Out-there Paranormal, how did that come about?
Okay, right. I'm really one of the founders of the group. I started investigating seriously in about 2008 with another group called Great Yarmouth Paranormal Investigators. And unfortunately, we had a paranormal fallout. Like musicians do, we disagree on certain elements of the paranormal. So three of us broke away and formed our own group. Couldn't make our minds up what to call ourselves. So what we're actually doing, we're looking to find out what's out there, and that's it. It kind of stuck. So we became Out There Paranormal, and ever since then, we've just been going about, mostly locally, looking at our local folklore, mystery tales, ghosts, and all that kind of stuff, investigating what we can actually find. But we like to look more at the whole thing rather than just go out on a little ghost hunt. We are more paranormal researchers and investigators. So I tend to do an awful lot of research in the venues that we're going to. We'll then go and investigate. If we do experience any phenomena whatsoever, then we'll make a note of it, go back, and then I'll do some more research to see if we can find an explanation for it. We also then like to tell the history of the sites that we visit, because I think it's really important to tie the two together. It's not just about investigating, it's about telling the stories too. But then again, it's throwing it open to an audience and saying, well, this is the history of the place. This is what's happened. And then we say, what do you think? So we have a look through everything that we do, and then we like to throw it over to a respective audience to see what they think of what we've done. So we're very visual. We have a YouTube channel that we use. And recently, in the last sort of 18 months or so, we've started a podcast channel as well, where it's sort of telling stories and talking about various different aspects of the paranormal. So that's as far as Out There goes.
Yeah.
There are five of us in the group, actually, but you will only see me and Jules because we do most of the work. In fact, since lockdown, it's only been me and Jules doing the work because we were in a bubble together, so we could actually keep seeing each other, providing support throughout the lockdown period. And we just carried on from there. So, and we seem to work quite well.
We do. I mean, I joined the group about 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
It's quite a long time ago now, isn't it? Gosh, time flies.
Certainly does.
I met Nigel actually at a Euphoria group, a UFO research group that we were both interested in. We got talking on Facebook, and it kind of went from there, really. And I was invited out because I said I had psychic abilities, and Nigel said, do you want to come along for an investigation? I leapt at the chance because, I've always had an interest. I've always had what I class as psychic abilities, but I'd never really done much with it other than experience phenomena that I couldn't explain. So when Nigel said, come out with us, I jumped at the chance. I did an investigation with them, and Nigel was quite impressed with what I could do. So he invited me to join the group, which was a great honor because Out There has got a very good reputation out there. Excuse the pun. In the marketplace for being sort of a high caliber paranormal investigation group. It's the group isn't in it for the scares, although that's part of the experience. But we focus a lot on the history. We focus a lot on what things could be. As Nigel said, I don't need to go into it in any more detail, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, not just checking out haunted locations, which is the bit I absolutely love, really enjoy it. But, we.
You are an out-and-out investigator, aren't you?
I love it.
Actually getting outside and doing
how many people on a Saturday night? Most people on a Saturday night, let's go down the pub for a drink.
Yeah.
No, Juliette and Nigel, let's go to a spooky haunted forest and see what happens.
Why not?
We took you out for a treat last weekend, didn't I?
Yeah.
We've got someone to go, Jules. Where are we going? It's a secret.
Are we going out to for some food, going to a nice pub or something? No. We go in the middle of nowhere to an old airfield.
To drive around an old airfield.
But you know what?
So
it's absolutely fascinating because you're coming across things that just get lost completely in time. There's so much, particularly in Norfolk, left over from World War II and, the American Air Base people that came over, the military and the B-17 bombers. I mean, there's so much history and it's slowly disappearing. So not only do we focus on the paranormal side of it and the oohs and the ahs and the spooks, we tell people's stories. We tell the stories of airmen that perhaps went off on a B-17, terrified they were never going to be seen again. They wouldn't come home. So it's quite an emotive subject as well. And we like their stories to be told and just for people to remember. And we did Deetham Green, when was it, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, before, just as the lockdown had started,
and it was wonderful because we actually got a commendation from the 452nd Bomb Group in the United States, which was absolutely wonderful. Because when you're putting things out there, you have to be aware that the relatives are still alive, and it's a sensitive subject. So to get a commendation from, a bomb group, from military personnel, relatives, people, even, the older generation that were there, that served there during the Second World, to say, we love what you did.
Thank you so much for reminding people of what was there.
That's the biggest gift to us.
Yeah.
It really, really is.
It is
just
people
to know.
buying into it, isn't it? It's the fact that we want people to buy into it. And it isn't just a case of, one of my pet hates is when you go onto, and it's especially prevalent on Facebook, because when you go on and see these lives where people are going out and they break into an abandoned building and they'll jump up and down and shout, "Woo, ghost, wow, it's a demon now," and it's all for like likes and stars.
But
and
a lot
stuff
of
like
that is for ratings, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's people love to be scared. People love to watch it, and it ups the ratings.
But there's nothing there. There's no sort of explanation as to why they're in that building,
isn't it?
Yeah, but it's the wrong kind of entertainment.
Yeah, we're completely different.
We can start arguing, by the way. So
no. It's just what we do is completely different. There's different markets. There's a market for entertainment and bangs and knocks that happen every single week on television, and we know the leading paranormal shows that do that. Some are fab, some are not so fab, but we are a little bit more scientific in what we do.
Yeah, we kind of drop in the middle, don't we?
Well, you are, because you're more into the scientific bits than me.
Yeah, I'm more into looking.
Nigel's got all the kit.
I like gathering evidence. I will look at evidence. I'll gather as much information as I can when we're out investigating. So you'll hear a noise. Okay, most people just say, "Oh, there's a noise." I'll be like, "Oh, there's a noise." Okay, what's the temperature?
Yeah.
Do we have a meter running? Was there like an EMF spike at all? You're looking at the other stuff that goes with it, because gathering evidence is important. If you're going to try and prove that there is something around, then you're going to need to have as much evidence as you can possibly get.
And repeat the experience as well.
Exactly, yeah. You need to be able to go back and say, okay, when this happened, we had this, and this as well. There you go. Lay out and say, here's our evidence. What do you think? So that's really what we're trying to do.
Have you ever been sort of, when you've done an investigation, have you ever gone somewhere and then realised that possibly, there's more going on in the environment than you thought there might be? Or have you ever been in a situation where you've started to get quite worried about what was going on?
Worried.
The only one that worried recently, I would say, would be St Mary's at East Somerton. With the explosions.
Gosh, that was bizarre.
Really weird experience.
Yeah,
we started filming another short series called Tales from Haunted Norfolk, and we were like telling local sort of folklore tales that like ghost stories and things attached to them. And there's a local site called St Mary's Church at East Somerton. It's a ruined church. It's been ruined since the 17th century. And it's got this folklore tale attached to it about a witch who's buried in the church, and this oak tree grew up out of a wooden leg and destroyed the church. So we'd filmed this, we told the story, filmed that bit. So we went back to do an investigation, which is what we're trying to do with the series. Tell the stories, go to the site, do an investigation, see what we find out.
Yeah.
And we went to East Somerton, and we were there. We set everything up, and it was quiet. You got a sense there was something there that didn't like you, didn't you? They didn't want you there.
Yeah, but I mean, it was more the fact I was female more than anything.
I think it was the fact they didn't want you in the church. But then we're standing there listening. We suddenly heard this voice in the distance, like shouting, going, "Yeah, yeah," and we're like, "The hell was that?"
We thought it was people mucking around, to be honest.
So we got ready to pack our kit up and go, because the last thing you want is like locals sort of turning up and giving you grief. So I thought, we'll get ready to go in case anybody turns up. And then all of a sudden we heard what sounded like gunfire. And we're like, what the hell is that?
We started recording, didn't we? I said, quick, get the digital recorder
I set the digital recorder up. As soon as we started doing it, I said, we're going to record this because it may be something really weird. The gunfire stopped. And what sounded like rolling explosions, it sounded like bombs going off. in the distance. We immediately thought fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's got to be fireworks.
And there was no, I mean, what time was it? It was about
9 o'clock, wasn't
was
it?
it? Was it a bit later?
It might have been a bit later than actually. It might have been about 9:30, 10
So
o'clock.
it's not going to be sort of shooting grouse or anything, as folk like to do around.
I mean, we
parts.
have got the recording of the noises that we can send through to you if you'd like to sort of tag it onto here as well.
Very...
I do. I'll put that on the end of the episode.
Exactly what we're talking about.
Anything,
but
like
it sounded
that,
like just like bombs going off, and it really threw us. We just were not expecting this at all.
We were shocked.
You know, we were in church thinking there'd been stories about mysterious monks pushing people, and you could hear them chanting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we thought, oh, we might encounter a mysterious monk. But instead, we got these weird bomb explosions. So anyway, I go back and do some research. I'd remembered something about the site because I'd researched it prior to going, that during World War II, it was a decoy site for Great Yarmouth. What they did was, when Yarmouth was bombed, it was quite an important port in World War II. When Yarmouth was attacked, they put the fires out as quickly as they could. Then they'd set fire to these canisters in the field next door to this ruined church in the hope that it would confuse the German planes into bombing the decoy.
Yeah.
So we thought, are we in some kind of weird time slip where it's bombs going off on this decoy? And we're like, nah, that can't be that. That's bonkers. It's got to be fireworks.
Yeah. But
so
we would have seen them.
We would have seen them. Yeah, we couldn't see anything. That's the thing. We didn't see any
nothing.
fireworks going off. And it didn't sound like any fireworks. You always get, they hear that noise.
And it was the intermittent, so you get boom, boom, boom.
It was like rolling thunder.
It sounded like bombs dropping, but we just had no idea. We went through everything we possibly could. Could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be this? Trying to break it down and justify just what it could be. You know, I even thought because at Great Yarmouth off the coast, they're putting in windmills.
Oh, wind turbines.
Turbines, sorry. They're putting those in. And I thought, could they be working on those? So Nigel went off, did the research. No, they weren't working on those at that particular time because sound can travel, especially when things are hitting the ground. You know, quite surprisingly, sound can travel quite some distance.
Yeah,
so we were looking further afield.
It's a very flat landscape as well. We're talking Norfolk here, and it's very flat, and you were quite close to the coast as well. The actual sea itself is about a mile away from where this church is. So we did some research, didn't we? And I decided to look at the Imperial War Museum bombing charts or bombing things from World War II to see whether or not there'd been any bombing raids on the night that we were actually looking at this decoy. And there were three consecutive nights at Yarmouth. It was bombed on consecutive nights on the same date that we were at the site.
At night.
Yeah. So you're then thinking to yourself, is this some kind of mad coincidence or did we actually hear something? So
that was interesting. And it threw us completely because
really
they'd
strange.
never, I mean, you did the research. You said you'd never come across anybody saying they'd heard anything.
No.
Anybody that had gone to that site
before.
Historically, it's never been documented anywhere. So we just don't know what it could be. No. We really don't.
So it is in that box, like, what the hell box?
But it just opened up a can of worms, didn't it? Yeah. We were trying to figure out what on earth it could be.
So strange.
When you had this phenomenon, did you experience any other sort of environmental phenomenon at the same time? Where changing a change in the atmosphere, a change in the...
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't. Yeah.
Your little meter
Yeah, we did. I mean, we did some calling out sessions after we'd done this, and when I'm out on outdoor locations, I've got a meter called a Tri-Field Natural EM meter.
That's the one.
It actually sort of registers natural electronic fields rather than like your normal stuff like Mel meters and things like that doing man-made fields. Mm-hmm. And we had this set up and it went off. So then we started asking questions to see if we get it to respond, and it did respond to answer some of the questions.
It responded on command, which was quite interesting.
But it wouldn't respond to you.
No.
But it would respond to me, which was really, really odd. So we did have that as well. But whether it's tied in with the other bit, we don't know. As far as temperature and other fluctuations go, it didn't change.
No.
It got relatively cold towards the end of the night because we're talking about April, so it was getting colder.
Yeah.
It was a fairly constant temperature.
Yeah.
And as far as it's an abandoned area, so it's got no electricity or anything there. So running something like a Mel meter or something like that it's not going to show you anything. It's going to be flat all night, which is what it was. So because there's actually no man-made fields occurring there. So we didn't have anything.
Nigel, I know that you're quite skeptical, which is good because I am a little bit on that fence as well. But Juliette, I'm interested to ask you regarding the psychic side of things, how does that work? I mean, for you, because I get the impression that anyone that has these kind of sensitive feelings, or however you describe it, how does it actually work for you? Because everybody seems to have it slightly differently.
They do, and it's incredibly interesting because I've spoken to other sensitive people or psychic people. I've had the ability to experience what I experienced since the age of about 5 or 6, when I was brought up in a very old farmhouse, which was allegedly haunted. And unbeknown to me, when my father went to purchase the house, the locals said to my father, "Whatever you do, don't buy that house, it's haunted." And my father's, big disbeliever. What a load of rubbish. It's a good price. We're going to buy this house. So very strange things happened within that house, but they seemed to happen more to me than anybody else. And as a child, I didn't really think much of it. I saw things. I had experiences there, which I cannot explain, but I was never frightened or unnerved by it. To me, it was normal, because that kind of side of things is my normal. As I got older, it spiraled a little bit because I didn't have a hold of it, and I was getting things all the time, sensing things all the time. And at one point, I thought I was going crazy. I thought, is there something wrong with me? And I actually went to another psychic at the time when I was probably in my early 30s, who gave me a lot of tools, if you like, to be able to control it and ground myself, which is absolutely crucial when you do have these abilities, to be able to get control of it. Otherwise, sensitive psychics, whatever you want to call them, it's exhausting, because it's almost like an energy is, or you're channeling through an energy all the time, or spirits can take your energy all the time to communicate if they wish to. So you've got to ground yourself with it. That is really, really important. I can hear things sometimes. Very seldom do I see, although I have seen sight of anything paranormal or supposedly paranormal. Doesn't always occur to me. I can sense them. I feel them. I get images when they're communicating, almost like pictures, or I get movies that play back in my head, is the best way I can describe it. And they show me different things sometimes. And I found this, and I think other psychics would agree with me. Sometimes we get the information wrong, and it's not because the information that is coming through to us is incorrect. It's how we interpret it that can often be wrong. Sometimes, for example, I will get an image of a person. Perhaps they died in their 80s, but they will show themselves in their 20s or 30s, in a time in life when they're at their happiest. And that can happen. So when you talk to somebody, you say, "Oh, I'm seeing this person, and they're dressed like this and they look like this." People will cut off and say, "Well, that wasn't my grandmother, because she died in her 80s." And so they will often, that can cause confusion, because they will often show themselves how they want to be seen. That's another thing. So there's a lot of stumbling blocks in doing what I do, but I'm also interested in the science around it as well. I mean, one of the things I'm fascinated by is quantum theory and the string theory, and parallel dimensions coexisting at the same time. My interest in that is because paranormal experiences only last for a minute, 2 minutes, something like that. You never get them for days, years, hours. Experiences tend to be a fleeting glimpse or a fleeting experience. "Oh, I thought I saw something. There was an old lady at the end of my bed and she faded away." One of my theories, and I was talking to Evelyn Hollow about this, who did Uncanny. Fabulous lady, very, very interesting.
Really interesting, yeah.
I was talking to her about this because my theory is that perhaps it's just our dimension overlapping with perhaps a past dimension, for whatever particular reason, just for a few fleeting moments. And we interpret that as a ghost or something paranormal. But actually, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just a different dimension that's overlapping with our own dimension, because it doesn't last for very long. And I've always questioned that. I've always wondered. I don't know how I get what I get and how it works. I wish I did. I don't think any mediums, the only way you're going to know is if you die, quite frankly. I think we've all got theories on how it works, and a lot of mediums and psychics will say, I make a huge experience in this and I know all the answers. Fact is, we don't. None of us do. We're all trying to look for the answers.
I think what you touch on there is kind of the many worlds theory, where we live in there's many of us out there, and we're all living our lives, and we all live our lives slightly differently, and sometimes those veils overlap, and we get a peek of whatever it might be, and what we perceive as a ghost is something that might be just living its life in another time and another era. So there's a possibility, and that these locations that are built around the world that you say, that's a really haunted location. It's not. It's just that's a crossing point. That's where the veil thins a little bit, so that you get more of that activity going on. But what you touch on there regarding with psychic abilities and having impressions in the mind, I think that I've always believed. I spoke about this last night. I did a live stream, and we were talking about psychics and mediums, and that the words have been used so much now with the advent of television. And it's kind of going on to my next question, is bringing in TV. And when I say TV, I mean actually on the TV. Mm-hmm. And you get these shows that come on that have to make money to stay doing what they're doing. Yeah. You have a lot of people that come on, and I'm a professional. I'm not going to name any names, but you have people that come on and they're a psychic or they're a medium, and some of the things they say, some of the times it turns into a little bit of a comedy. Yeah. And does that have a bounce back effect on someone like yourself who is trying to do the best they can with the abilities they've got and trying to interpret what they've got? But if you've got somebody running around saying, oh yes, it's this and it's that and it was definitely this, and they're on the telly, and it's the average person, you're correct, the paranormal is very rare. It's very rare for it to happen all the time, and whatever does happen will only happen for a slight moment. But if you've got someone running around with all this craziness going on, Joe Public is going to look at someone and says, oh, you're a psychic, are you? All right, then. Well, tell me something. Tell me the lottery numbers.
Yes, absolutely. And that happens a lot. I get a lot of people challenge me, but the way I handle that is I say, okay, bring it on. I welcome it. Anybody that wants to, in the nicest way, not in a horrible way, tear down my abilities and question, that's fine by me, because I question it myself. I question what I do myself. I would love to know where it all comes from. And I think it's very healthy for people to question. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with certain television shows. But again, you have to take it as entertainment. A lot of these shows on television are for entertainment. It's, put on, after 9 o'clock at night to scare people silly, which is what people want to see. And that's fine. Quite often I've sat there on a Saturday night, and watched some of them, because I feel like a bit of a scare. But on, legitimate paranormal investigations, you don't get a scare every week. We've gone to places and we stood there all night getting freezing cold in the middle of nowhere, and nothing's happened. Nothing. That's happened a lot.
It has happened a lot, yeah.
It's happened a lot. Yeah. But, most occasions we get very little. And when we do get something, most of the time it can be explained. I mean, Nigel, you can explain pareidolia and things like that, can't you?
I mean, there's always going to be an explanation for it. Looking at photographs, you got a picture, you see a face. What is that? How can you see that face in the picture? You have to take into account that there's lots of objects in that picture that have all joined together, and your brain is matrixing them into something, because we're programmed for pattern recognition. We're looking for obvious shapes in random patterns, pareidolia. It's all part of our fight or flight mechanism. We're very, very primitive animals. People don't realise, they think we're sophisticated, but right underneath all this is really the basic ape.
Some more than others.
Stop it. Were you looking at me when you said that, Jules?
No, of course not.
But people don't understand that we are very, very primitive. We are very, very basic, and we still have this programmed into us. Babies always look towards a face because they're programmed to recognize faces. So we keep that throughout our lives. So when you're looking at a picture, you're going to look at the most obvious thing, and your brain's going to try and find a face in that picture. of course, obviously, if you do see a face and it is something that's obvious, then you need to have something else to back it up. So if you've been investigating, you've got a good picture, then have some other evidence to back it up. That's great. Throw that out as well. Because if you just throw a picture at me, I'm going to turn around and say, it's pareidolia. I'm really sorry, but you've got nothing else to back it up.
We do.
And it's hard because there could be something in that picture that is genuine.
Right. And spirit orbs is another one, isn't it?
Oh, God, orbs.
Oh, the amount of questions we get on orbs. Oh, my God, it's a spirit. It's dust.
It's dust.
Get over it. It's just dust.
It may be, if you've seen something with the naked eye, I mean, we've seen lights that move with the naked eye and you can see it move, then that could be something in it. But if you're taking a picture and it's there, it's going to be particulate matter close to your lens. It's reflecting off the lens. It's just going to be dust. And it's trying your hardest to get people to understand that.
Yeah.
But I've got off track now.
And these TV shows don't help because so many of them, oh my gosh, that there's, look at all the orbs. It's paranormal. It's the spirit trying to get through. Oh.
Or then they throw the demon into the
mix. It's always a demon. There's
demon.
Always a demon. It's, the amount of TV shows I've seen where they talk about it's demonic. Why is it demonic? They never go into why they think it's demonic. Oh, oh my God, I've walked in and there's an evil presence here and it's demonic.
I was gonna say that there's been there's a number of places in England alone. There's a number of places that are quite high profile haunted locations, and that obviously they've all been covered by the normal investigators that are on the telly, and there's been shows made about them. But have you ever gone to any of those locations and had, completely different experiences?
I'm trying to think, where have I been?
Blickling, we've done. Well, we didn't investigate in Blickling because we couldn't afford it, to be honest.
I wouldn't let us in.
We couldn't, it's too expensive for the average little team.
Only way you can get into these venues, a lot of them is to actually go on an organised ghost hunt.
Yeah, at all, yeah.
We don't do organised ghost hunts. The reason why is because if we gather any evidence at this venue and we're in there with 30 other people, I cannot say whether or not it's somebody else in the party that's made the noise.
You can't.
I've got no way of proving that any evidence that I've collected is genuine because I cannot account for everybody that's there. I'd love to be able to go to do 30 East Drive and the Kelvin and Hatch Bunker and all the other ones that people go to, but the fact of the matter is
it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds
to try and hire a venue. And,
we're kind of little folk in a very big paranormal world, and we haven't got hundreds and thousands of pounds to throw at places to go and just stand there for an evening. We physically can't afford it. The only way we could possibly do it, as Nigel says, is to get 30 people in, 15-20 quid a ticket, but then it jeopardizes everything that our heart is set out on. Our
that's what we're not there for. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against organized events. I think it's a good doorway into looking at the paranormal and understand how some works. And some of these event organizers are very, very good because they set the thing up and it's brilliant.
Well, we've been to one, haven't we? And that was fun. We enjoyed that.
It was good fun, but we couldn't. We were going to film it all hours and do it as a video.
Too much noise.
It's too much noise. We couldn't do it.
No, we couldn't do it. It's nice for entertainment, though. It's fun. I mean, I've been to a Blickling Hall in Norfolk, which is famous for the birthplace of Queen Anne Boleyn. She the second Queen of Henry VIII, I think. Yeah. Oh, my goodness, I've got it right. Can't believe it. But my history is usually terrible.
I'm thinking now. Yes, it was Catherine Barragon, then Anne Boleyn. Yes, it was.
But Blickling is a fascinating building. Absolutely love it. It's a nice place to visit. We cannot afford to investigate there, unfortunately, but I've walked around there myself, just as a paying customer, if you will.
Yeah.
And, there are certain places where a lady is meant to be seen and Anne Boleyn is meant to be seen, even though she wasn't born in Blickling Hall. The land that it was built on was where her original property used to be, where she was born and raised as a child. And it's fascinating because of that particular place, I saw a painting and it draws me in every single time of this chap with a ruff around his neck. And every time I see him, I get this stabbing pain in my chest. And I never understood why. And I used to walk out of the room and walk back in again and look at this painting and think, is it in my head? Is it me? Is it some kind of, psychosomatic response? I really don't know. But I asked one of the guides there and I said, I keep getting, tell me the history of this chap, and she said to me, oh, he was stabbed through the heart in a duel and he died.
Really
interesting.
Oh.
I didn't know any of this, but every time, and on several visits, I walked past this very painting of this chap in the 1500s or whenever it was, and I kept getting a real bad pain here, and I was thinking, what on earth, like an extremely painful stitch. And make of that what you will.
He made it back to Blickling Hall, and he actually died in the hall.
Yeah, it's
because they're saying sometimes he's one of the ones that you can actually hear groaning sometimes as he dies.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but so say that's one of the ones that I've sort of picked up when I've gone there and spoken to them, like saying, it's not in the books. The books will all have Anne Boleyn and the headless Anne Boleyn with the headless horses and the carriage.
I think
and
her
all this nonsense.
father is meant to be seen as well.
Yeah, he turns up as well.
It's meant to be full of ghosts. But ghosts aside, the history of that place and walking around, absolutely beautiful. And especially they have things like Christmas and things like that, traditional Christmas, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's a good place to go to.
I'm not on commission, by the way, but I do love it there.
With older buildings, kind of my favourite thing is castles and manor houses, medieval, that kind of era. They have a lot of history, and people with these older houses, all those years ago, they'd have families that live in them, and generations of people would live in them, and there'd be all sorts going on, people being murdered and, being born and dying and all that stuff. What's your thoughts on the emotions of those generations? And do you think that they in some way impact on the environment, maybe the building or the atmosphere of the building, and that those that, not everyone, but some people can go in there and act as a kind of catalyst to either feel or experience or even see an apparition, that maybe lived 100 years ago, 500 years ago?
That's interesting, because you then fall into one of those theoretical territories that people laugh at, but then to me has always some kind of grounding to it, and that's stone tape theory. Mm-hmm. Originally BBC play from the 1970s, but prior to that there had been some research into the possibility. And it does tend to be older buildings that you find it, mainly because they are built of natural stone, which can contain all sorts of elements.
And wattle and daub.
All old stuff, all natural stuff.
Cattle poo and straw, and that's pretty natural, isn't it? Must have been pretty stinky at the time.
But when you look at the stone, is there some kind of matrix in that stone that holds that stuff in there? Years ago, we used to record things on cassette tapes, and cassette tapes, I do believe, of ferrous oxide, which is like this metallic element. Mm-hmm. What if some way the stones of buildings contain elements like ferrous oxide, like quartz, or anything like that? It's got the ability to record this emotion.
Absolutely.
Yep.
This is the thing we're talking about. We'll throw Evelyn Hollow into the mix again. She's a Scottish parapsychologist we spoke to recently. She has a theory about consciousness and quantum theory, where consciousness is it's an energy of sorts. So what if the stone could store this energy of sorts and record it in there? And certain people have the ability to press the play button. So I could walk into a building and get absolutely nothing at all.
Yep.
Okay. Jules could walk into a building and have that ability, because she's more psychically attuned. She's got the ability to press the play button and hear some of the information that's contained in those stones. So is that possible? That to me is intriguing, because okay, it's theoretical. Some people could use the word pseudoscience because it's not true and all that lot. But to me, it's got that essence of it's a possibility, because, like I said, there's so much happened in that space. So much trauma, so much history, so many things going. If a traumatic experience does generate that kind of energy that screams really loudly and is loud enough to be recorded into the stone, then are we going to be able to go back and play that? So that's what I find really interesting about it. So that's intriguing. I really like that idea. Whether or not it's true, I don't know, but I think it's got grounds, definitely.
Well, interestingly enough, we go back to the 1980s. Have you ever heard of an experiment that was that took place by two, I think they were electrical engineers in Wales, called the Talking Walls experiment?
No.
This was something that took place in Kengfig, in the Prince of Wales pub, which is a 15th century building, and they have a building out the back. It's a function room now, and back in the day, the barman, the owner, was complaining that at night he would lock the place up and he would hear noises from what was the function room. A little bit of research. Back in the day, in the 15th century, that building was used as a village court. So people would be sentenced to death there. There would be hearings there, that kind of stuff. So these two guys, electrical engineers, they came up with the theory that, like we just spoke about, that maybe that the building could hold memory. It could, it was like a giant tape recorder because of the stone, the quartz, and the limestone and all that was built off. That it was could hold energy. So they came up with a theory that what if we charge those walls with 10, 20, 30,000 volts of electricity? What would be released? So they got that okay from the barman because he wanted an answer, and they put these electronic probes into the walls around the building. They locked the doors, they left recorders in there, and then they charged with a generator. They charged the building for a number of minutes, and then just switched the power off and just left it. Some of the recordings that they captured are completely bizarre. You can hear people talking in Old Welsh.
Wow.
You can hear what sounds like a television. You can hear sounds like a drawbridge or a chain being wound up. And one of the great things is I have a copy of these original recordings. So I'm quite happy to send to you so you can have a listen.
That's fantastic.
Because the two guys that did it, they were in conversation, because back in those days you would record everything on cassette and send it, and they were researching it. And I was quite fortunate to have a copy of this. And I mean, obviously it's degraded a little bit, but you can really hear what's going on. And it is completely fascinating. So my point is, telling you that little story, is that also a news crew went back to the pub a few years ago, and they did a news report, and they actually caught a phenomenon in the building. They locked the building, they put recorders in there, and in the morning the engineer went back and retrieved the recorders, and they recorded what sounded like a walking stick being tapped on the wooden floor, or maybe a judge's hammer being knocked down. So yeah, I mean, maybe buildings do in some way have some sort of audio memory, and under right conditions that they're played back. So going on from that, I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on apparitions and people seeing alleged people from the past? I mean, for example, the one of the classic cases is the chap that was driving home down in I think it was the south of England, and he looked to the right and he looked in a field, and there was what he described as a medieval man on a horse riding across a field, and he looked straight at him, and then the guy just vanished. Yeah. So what's your thoughts on apparitions and stuff like that?
We've got some classic apparition tales we can tell, haven't we?
Yeah.
Because my introduction to the paranormal, what really got me interested in it was actually seeing an apparition myself. I was living in a village called Brundle in Norfolk with my parents, and I'd been to watch Norwich City football match on a Saturday afternoon.
Never mind.
I know. Well, I'm not a fan. I just watch the game. But I was with my friend Steve, and we came out of the station. It was November, and we were walking up the road towards his house. And there was a girl in front of us in a school uniform. This was a Saturday afternoon in November, and she had a blouse on, and we're like, really weird. What is that girl like? She's just a blouse in November. Followed up the road, and a little bit further up, there's another road junction where it goes into a road called Station New Road. And along the side of the road, there's like all these bushes. The girl disappeared into the bushes. So me and my friend Steve said, where'd that girl go? We weren't very far behind her. So we sort of jogged up, looked to see where she'd gone. She obviously thought she'd gone through a gateway in this hedge. There's no gateway. It's just a hedge of brambles and bushes and stuff. There's a house in the distance, but there's no way she could have got through that hedge, across that bit of lawn into that house before we actually got up behind her, which she thought was really, really odd. So anyway, we sort of disappeared home quite quickly because that spooked us a little bit. We went down the local pub that night and was regaled with the tale. Now, whether this is true or not, I don't know. I've got a sneaky suspicion it was the person in the bar just winding up two gullible teenagers. But he told us that there'd been an accident on that road, and a young girl had been hit by a hit-and-run driver in the 1970s and left for dead in the hedge where we saw the girl disappear into. And you're like,
that's
God, yeah,
interesting.
really,
Did you ever
really
research
creepy.
that?
I did try to, but we couldn't find anything.
Oh.
That's the thing, which makes me think it was just someone winding up a couple of gullible kids. But in a phrase that comes from one of my favourite podcasts, I know what I saw. And there's no denying it. We saw that girl. Two of us witnessed it, and yeah, I have no idea what it was. Really don't.
Your father had an experience, didn't he?
My
as well?
father had an experience as well. We used to live in Kent,
famous one.
and there's a road in Kent called Bluebell Hill. And Bluebell Hill is renowned for the ghost of a girl who died in a car accident there before her wedding. And there's been numerous occasions where this young lady has flagged down vehicles, and vehicles have stopped. She's actually physically got into vehicles. They've driven off, and then she's disappeared. Or she stopped vehicles and they've gone to let her into the vehicle, and she disappears. My dad was an ambulance driver, and they were coming back from a call. They weren't required to take the person to the hospital, so they were returning back to their station. They were then going up Bluebell Hill towards Maidstone, and they saw a woman. It was raining, early hours of the morning. They saw a woman standing at the side of the road, looking quite forlorn. So my dad said, "We better stop, make sure she's okay." So they stopped the ambulance. His crewmate Don Dillon went down the window and said to her, "Can we give you a lift? Are you okay?" And she nodded her head. So my dad got out to go and open the back door of the ambulance. This girl was following them. He opened the back door of the ambulance, turned around to say, "Get into the ambulance," and she'd gone. They looked up and down the road, couldn't see her anywhere, disappeared into thin air.
I find those stories of like the Phantom Hitchhiker and stuff like that, I find them even more fascinating. It's all very well that you're driving down the road and you pull over and then you look around and the person's gone. Yeah. But when the actual ghost or apparition physically interacts with something, solid matter like a door, and opens the door, or gets on the back of your motorbike and you can feel their hands around your waist, and then you ride off and you can see them in your mirror and then they're gone. Yeah. That there's another level of whatever's going on there.
Yeah.
As we say, when people see a ghost, they don't always know they've seen a ghost, because apparitions, ghosts, they seem like real people.
They're there doing what a normal person would do. My schoolgirl was just walking up the road on her way home from school. If she hadn't disappeared into the hedge, we'd have thought nothing of it. And it's the fact that you did something out of the ordinary that made you think, what the hell's going on there? You with your aeroplane.
Oh, yes.
The Norwich Airport.
Yes, that's true. I was just driving along, normally as you do, and I had Norwich International Airport on my right-hand side, and it was a busy day. Sun was shining, and I was just glancing up, and I looked at the sky. I was, coming up towards the airport where the road goes from 2 lanes into 1. And as I looked up, I saw what looked like a bomber plane, and I saw the sun glint on it. It was a solid object, but I thought, that's strange, because there was no sound and nobody else seemed to notice it. It was bizarre. And I was watching this thing, obviously trying to watch the road as well, I hasten to point out, because I was driving, but I was slowing down because the traffic had come to a stop. And I saw this plane go across over my car, heading away from the airport. And it was a beautiful, sort of a bright silver underneath, and it looked completely solid. And I looked away, because the traffic started to move. I looked up again, nothing, just absolutely nothing. And I still, to this day, I have no idea, but apparently there has been aircraft sightings, whether it's some kind of time lapse situation, I don't know, but other people have mentioned and documented seeing rogue aircraft. And I went to, there's a very little museum behind Norwich Airport. Not a lot of people know about it, but it's really interesting place. And you can have a look at old World War II stuff. You can go and walk around some of the craft and look in a Nimrod, all these kind of things if you want to. They have specialist open days where you can go and sit in a fighter jet and things like that. But I was talking to some of the volunteers there about my experience. Yeah. And, they were explaining to me that particular airfield during the Second World War did have bombers there, which isn't really heavily documented.
It was American Air Force Base that
Yeah.
had B-24 Liberator bombers
I had
there.
no idea.
When they started the war, they were olive drab, but towards the end of the war, when they had superiority, the planes were left in their natural silver colour. So
Yeah, you see, because
really odd.
I didn't know that. There's no way I could have known that.
Oh no,
you know,
Well,
because it's not common knowledge. But I definitely saw it. But it looked like a solid plane in the sky. It didn't look like a ghost plane or anything. You know, it wasn't see-through or anything like that. It just looked like a normal plane in the sky. And, you know, as I said, the sun glinted and caught the wing. So to me, it looked like a completely solid object. The only reason why I questioned, number one, it was an old-fashioned plane and not many. Well, how many bomber planes are actually still able to fly in the sky? Not
none
many.
of that type.
One?
Yeah, I mean, we've got Lancasters and a bit about the Britain flight, but there's only one American Air Force plane. That's the Sally B, and that's stationed at Duxford. That's not silver. That's olive drab.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
that's the only
and
one.
the other thing I questioned was the lack of sound.
No
because
noise.
They're really noisy.
Yeah. Four-engine plane
noisy.
is very loud. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was strange.
So yeah, apparitions are fantastic. They appear. I mean, the ones that really fascinate me are the crisis apparitions that people get before somebody dies or when someone has died and they appear to them as well. And there's loads of classic examples of those as well. And
we need to cover that in our podcast.
Yeah, it'd be a good one to sort of look at. Yeah,
Ooh.
But it's really, I can't explain it. Are we hallucinating? No, because on the occasions, the two occasions that I mentioned, there were two witnesses. There was myself and my friend Steve, and there was my dad and his crewmate Don. So, can you say that two of us were having the same hallucination? I don't know.
I remember a story. Two young girls, teenagers. They had a housemate, a guy in England. They went to holiday in India. And this is documented. In a book. They went to holiday in India and they were staying in different places. And one night they were in their room because they were moving around. They were in their room just relaxing, and all of a sudden their housemate runs through the door, comes up to them waving his hands, and then he vanishes. And they're, for a moment they're thinking, what's he doing here? He shouldn't be here. He should be back in England. So they called through to the home, and at that moment the guy had a problem. Something had happened which was quite serious, but at the same time that he'd appeared to them in their hotel room in India.
It does make you wonder because could it be we don't know enough about the human brain yet, because we know there's a vast percentage of the human brain that isn't actually used, or we believe isn't actually used. So there are things about the human brain we don't know. And could it be some kind of projecting of extreme emotion when somebody's in distress? I mean, you hear amazing things about what the human body can do. You hear of cases where an adrenaline surge and people can lift up cars and things like that. But it just fascinates me about the human brain and what can it actually do.
There's so much tied up in here.
We need to do some more experiments and really find out what it can do.
Yeah, be careful doing experiments with people's brains.
I know. I wanted to do the God helmet, but Nigel wouldn't let me.
Personally, yeah.
Going on to experiments and the human mind and the human brain, I used to be quite into EVP research this is a number of years ago. And I had some responses, and I had what sounded like normal people having a conversation in a room or talking to me and answering questions. And that kind of made me, take a step back for a while, because that kind of stuff does scare you a little.
Yeah.
Well, it did me anyway, because I was only in my late 20s and still a bit jokey about it. Like, whoa, let's talk to ghosts. And then something happens and you're like, oh, I didn't expect that. But my point is that when you talk about the mind, and the way that we don't really understand it fully. Well, what's your thoughts on the poltergeist phenomenon and mind over matter, should we say, or is it just simply we have something in us when we're born, when we're young, that as you say, when we get older we lose that ability, and we don't know that we're doing it, but maybe we're the ones that are causing this phenomenon? Or do you think there's something else that's maybe causing it?
That's really interesting. Children certainly more susceptible to the paranormal. The classic example is people with invisible friends. You chat to an invisible friend, and they sometimes have described the invisible friend, and you're like, well, hang about, that doesn't sound like something you've made up. That sounds something very in depth.
Children are so open-minded, aren't they?
Yeah.
They don't really question. They haven't been tainted by society.
No, you've not been programmed to think, no, that's not right. You actually think to yourself, well, that is there and I can see this. So it's very real in my mind's eye because I can see it. But poltergeists are one of those very weird things because they there's an awful lot of research gone into looking at them, and they do tend to sort of follow a certain pattern where the phenomena starts at low level, being knocking noises, banging noises, things like that. And then that slowly starts to escalate into other things. There are two classic cases that you can sort of touch on. One of them is the one that Danny Robbins covered in BBC Sounds podcast for the Battersea Poltergeist, which is a completely fascinating story. The fact they managed to talk to Shirley, the lady that's still alive as well, which makes it even more interesting. And that was one that followed the classic pattern of escalation, where it was noises and then other things would happen. There were fires, there were objects, supports that appeared. They got writing, it spoke to them. There were so many different, it built and built and built. And another classic is the Enfield poltergeist, which was then heavily documented by, was it the SPR, I think, that did an investigation into it. And the same again.
Maurice Groves.
That's right, yeah. It started with the same thing again, where you've got the knockings and noises, and it escalated into a lot more things. Objects being moved around, quite heavy objects as well. The children, whether or not you believe it, being thrown into the air, because there's that classic one, the girl being thrown through the air picture, but it looks like she's jumping off a bed. To a certain degree, the girls at the Enfield case did admit they did actually do things to try and sort of gee it along a bit, but they didn't do all of the things. It was only some of the things they did to try and wind up the investigators, they said, for laugh. And Shirley from the Battersea Poltergeist one said she never did anything at all to actually sort of wind the people up. Never sort of faked or anything. Everything that happened was genuine. So you've got to ask yourself, was it something that they can do? Do they have some kind of power in that sort of stage where they're both sort of coming over from teenage girls into adulthood? Is there something in the hormonal change that does that? Or is it something there that latches onto the fact that they are there and it latches onto their change and thinks? Because they do tend to happen, I think I'm right in thinking, I may well be wrong here, they do tend to happen more to girls than blokes. The poltergeist experience is more sort of female thing than a male thing. So it makes you wonder whether or not that is the case,
So, okay, so we're coming to the end of this episode now, but I have to ask the burning question, and it's the question that I always ask everyone. I think I've asked it in one way or another. What's your interpretation of a ghost? What do you think a ghost is?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I have mixed views on that. I think a ghost can be residual, which is the classic term for a recording. And I think you get spirits of loved ones as well. Einstein actually mentioned the fact, although he wasn't a believer in the paranormal, he mentioned that energy cannot end. So, when whatever makes us us, when we die, where does that energy go? So, and there's been various experiments of so-called, which experiment was it? The Gram experiment?
Oh, where he weighed the weight of the soul, 21 grams, where he weighed a person before they died and weighed them after they died.
Yes.
And
there was a
difference. The difference was 21 grams.
So I think a ghost, I think there's different variations of ghost. I think a ghost is the spirit of a person, is my interpretation. But I also think you can get residual hauntings as well, which is primarily a recording in time, which is when I talk about quantum theory and things like that. That is my interpretation of a ghost. What about you, Nigel?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're on the right track, though. I think you can categorize it. I mean, we love putting things into categories. That's what humans do, because you want to fit it into a certain box.
Yeah.
I think where you have a repetitive action that goes over and over and over again, the classic example being the Roman soldiers marching through the cellar in York, and that's a residual. You're getting either a recording that may be recorded in the element of the building around you. We're talking about stone tape earlier on that's been triggered, or it could be, as Jules says, where two parallel universes touch and you're getting that momentary glimpse into that other world, into another time frame, something happening there. So
an intelligent haunting, when you get something that communicates
exactly,
with you,
you get that back to you.
It's almost like a soul. It's almost like somebody that you are communicating with.
And the fact that they understand us and they talk to us and they react to us must make you think in some way previously perhaps they were human. So,
and it's on response. I mean, some of the experiments we've done where we're getting communication on response.
Yeah,
you know, be it on the spirit box, noises, sounds, whatever, words, or be it tappings. If you're getting it on response, something's going on.
Yeah. So is it the fact that it is a disembodied soul for all intents and purposes that is stuck in some kind of limbo that can't move on or doesn't want to move on? It's that topic that we all love, that topic that we all want to try and get an explanation. We all want the
answer. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah, we love looking,
definitely,
and we have theories, but you know, in the long run, all we can do is go out, investigate, do our research, and present what we have to people and say, "This is what we have on offer.
What do you think?
Have a look and see what you think."
Well, I think that's a wrap for this episode, because we've been going for quite a while, actually, and we've covered some very interesting topics. And so I think I'm going to have to definitely get you guys back again, because there's a lot more there to learn. Definitely. But so what's in store for your Out There Paranormal? What's in store for 2022? Where are you going to be doing? Any projects?
Yeah, okay. Lots. We've rebooted. We started a project just before lockdown called Ghost Airfields, where we're going back to a lot of the old American air bases in Norfolk and telling the stories of the air bases. What we're saying is we're going to talk to the ghosts of the past and see what echoes remain. And it's difficult because you don't want to upset people by going back and talking to the possibility of picking up on airmen that might be there.
Yeah, we have to be sensitive.
We have to be sympathetic towards, but we want to tell the stories because there are so many amazing stories.
We don't want them
attached to those
forgotten.
air bases. We don't want them forgotten. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to continue with our Tales of Haunted Norfolk. We're going to go on and do more Tales of Haunted Norfolk, where we're going to touch on more of our local stories and go and investigate those sites as well.
Yep.
And we'll be doing some more podcast bits and pieces.
Loads of podcasts. We love telling stories. You know, we have some fascinating podcasts. So anybody that's thinking, what am I going to do? You know, I'm a bit bored, got nothing to do. Relax, drive home, listen to us telling our stories. We have some fascinating ghost stories.
We do have some fascinating ghosts. And we've got some incredible videos on our YouTube channel as well, if you like.
And Amazon Prime are on there too. You
Ghost
can't get away from us.
There's no escape.
Out There is everywhere.
We are out there. We are everywhere.
I will make sure that all of your links go out with this episode.
Very
so
kind.
People can
Thank you.
Track you down and find out. But anyway, so thanks again, Nigel and Juliette. Thank you for coming on Paratalk. I'm sure this is not your first and only appearance. I'm sure you'll be back. And thanks to everyone for giving it a listen, and I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.